great to see everybody today. I know we're here to talk about leveraging AI powered search and how all these AI tools that we're using really changing the search landscape. But before we do that, we'll introduce ourselves for those of you who might not know who we are. Tori, you want to start?
Yeah, I'm Tori Green. I'm the SEO specialist here at DeanHouston. I've had the pleasure of working on this presentation for the last 6 months or so I'm really excited to present it to you guys.
And everybody, I'm Colton Stombaugh. I'm the Executive Vice President of Performance Marketing here at DeanHouston. So I help support our demand generation digital marketing team, which Tori is a critical member of, as well as our content, media, and publicity teams to make sure that everything we're doing from a content, messaging, and digital perspective all kind of comes together in an integrated strategy to drive business outcomes, usually defined as, gaining search share, gaining mind share, ultimately generating leads and business opportunity. As Tori said, this is something that we've been looking at here at DeanHouston for some time now. She's been working on this presentation for about 6 months, but we've really been looking at this for about a year, 18 months, try and figure out how we can approach the changes that are happening, which, Tori, you want to flip to the next slide?
Let's get into it.
So search has changed. Sure, everybody on the call today is probably feeling that, whether you're heavily engaged in kind of the digital marketing side for your brand, or even just on, the searching side, you're probably doing it a little bit different. And with that, as industrial and technical products and service leaders, our approach to making sure that people can find our brands, when they're looking for solutions and ways to grow their business, our approaches need to change too. There's a lot of statistics out there, outside of just feel to kind of prove that. One of the big ones that we've really been keeping track of, and we have been feeling this for a lot of the brands we represent, is there is a pretty heavy headwind when it comes to organic search, or what we'd call traditional search traffic. Here we've got a great headline from Forbes, the 60% problem. Now that is probably a little clickbaity. I know we work with a lot of the people in the crowd, but I will say that search traffic is down. Maybe not that 60%, in the technical and industrial markets that we all collectively represent. In all honesty, it might be closer to that 15 to 20% mark, but search, traffic is down and continues to, decrease, really because of the prevalence of these AI tools that we're all starting to use, the AI overviews that are showing on top of organic searches that are creating a zero-click environment, which Tori will get into here in a minute. And with that, again, our approaches need to change. But as with all disruptions, all changes in the market, this probably represents an opportunity. And in this session, what we're hoping is that we can, give our point of view on the opportunity that represents, and hopefully give everybody here some actionable tips and strategies that they can use to make sure that they are capitalizing on the opportunity that this shift in consumer behavior represents. So with that said, Tori, let's dive in.
All right. So just wanted to start off with a few AI search stats of just what's been going on in the last year or so, and what's projected to happen. So at this time, there's about 1/3 of US adults that use AI search as their primary search tool, and that will only increase by 2027. Along with that, companies are now using AI in some capacity, about 72%. And then the most important one that has to do with our industry, the industrial marketing industry, is that technical buyers are using generative AI during their purchasing process. And that's extremely important to us right now because web traffic, like Colton was saying, is kind of decreasing. Increasing zero-click searches. So that's something that, of course, I'll talk about later. But as of right now, it's very important to adopt AI-focused content and just kind of make sure that we stay top of mind and position ourselves to show up in front of our intended audience. So what exactly is AI-powered search? It is just essentially AI, artificial intelligence, and machine learning that are put together to make your search results more accurate, more relevant, and more personalized. So the point of that is that it's supposed to essentially make your searches more streamlined and more productive. And the point of that is AI search is helping users find more information. It's changing how they trust their search results and who they go to for their information. So it's very important for us to adapt by working on our new strategies around AEO or answer engine optimization. And that's what we're here to help you do. Moving on to the key differences, some of these which are very prevalent. You all may be familiar with a lot of these. So traditional search, initially, it was very surface level. It wants to just understand the basic recognition of what you're trying to say. It gives you a very limited personalization kind of thing. And the algorithm that is that's a part of, very sorry about this, I'm kind of blanking, but the algorithm doesn't change very much with traditional search. In addition with that, it only gives out about normal site links to regular websites that are supposed to give you more information. Whereas AI search is more intuitive. It understands more semantic meanings and is able to give you more personalized results based on what it understands you are trying to search. Along with that, it does evolve with your user, your search information and also search trends. And then it gives you an AI generated answer, which is supposed to be a direct response to your question.
And, you know, ultimately what this is kind of how things are shifting here is before, you know, as marketers, when we thought about SEO, we really needed to look at very specific keywords, whether they be short tail, you know, so a basic product name, or long tail that, you know, included deeper question, you know, type terms and really attack very specific keywords. But now, because of AI, the way that these algorithms are working is much more sophisticated, where they can, you know, again, look at the semantic meaning and look for that deeper contextual understanding to try and figure out what is that customer really looking for, actually author its own content around that topic. So before, where we could say, hey, we want to target this list of keywords, or we want to make sure that we're ranking #1 for this core category term that's so important to our business, you know, that'll still continue to be, you know, important as long as traditional search is there. But now we need to think a little bit more deeper, a little bit more complex around that semantic question-based search that customers are looking for. Because there's a very good chance that they're going to use these AI overviews or LLM responses to educate themselves before they even get to a website, and not click on a website, hence that zero-click term that Tori was talking about.
Sure.
So that said, you want to show us a little bit about what these searches are looking like, Tori?
Yeah. So here's the anatomy of an AI overview, which is something that I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with. It's pretty hard to miss. It's at the top of the screen. But initially, you go into Google, you make your search. Google will detect that it's an informational search, which is the intent of the search. And then it will provide you an AI overview. So it's just a compilation of relevant information that is being pulled from trusted sources. And it gives you a direct answer based on what they feel is credible information and relevant to what you're saying. Essentially, if a user's query is answered here, it may lead to a zero-click search. But our job is to help you present yourself so that when you are showing the AI overviews and users want to find out more information, you are a part of those sources. So going into the citations, that is where they highlight the trusted sources. They show, for example, this one is one of our clients, and it's being chosen as a reputable source. for this informational search. And part 4 is that the generative AI is experimental. So it's basically a signal that AI still can kind of make some mistakes occasionally. And that's why it's so important for us to make sure that our content is accurate, make sure it's unbiased, make sure that it's complete, so that we can make sure that we're positioning our content correctly. And for the 5th part is where the original SEO results that we're used to now live. So under the AI overviews, it's still very important for us to want to rank high. So that's not to say that we're getting rid of SEO and AEO is the new thing now. They work together. So yeah, this is what's going on.
It's a great opportunity to win both, right?
This is an example of what AI search can look like in a conversational search. So in this example, there's a user that's saying, I'm looking for the best diaphragm pump, and it shows relevant results based on the conversational type query. So it's able to now understand more human language and respond in a more human-like sense. And that's important for us because we're already kind of seeing some progress here and showing up in AI search results. So it just kind of shows that how our audiences are streamlining their searches, and just we want to stay ahead of that to make sure that we're fully optimized for this type of thing.
And I firmly agree that the #1 source that they're citing here is absolutely correct. If you need a double diaphragm pump, Wilton's the way to go, but we'll leave that alone for a second. But what's really interesting about this is it does become a two-way conversation, right? So when we're thinking about what are the questions that somebody's going to come here and ask, this gives customers the opportunity to ask multiple questions, get more information that historically maybe they would have gotten from a website, and done a search result, got a list of the blue links, clicked one of them, and then the brand would have the opportunity to educate that customer within the context of their own website. Well, now that experience, should the customer choose, can all happen here. So again, this is one of those reasons we're seeing search traffic start to go down, because this is where the education is happening. Again, why it's so critical to make sure that we're positioning ourselves really, really well to be indexed and talked about on these LLM chat-driven tools.
And so now, how does AI-powered search affect 2 different things? 1, your digital presence, and 2, your end users, your audience. So it affects your digital presence because AI-generated search it reduces the clicks, and that impacts organic search traffic. So since we rely on organic search a little bit to kind of attract and engage our customers, we want to respond to that with this opportunity, which is authoritative, well-structured content. That is something that is extremely prioritized by Google for AI-generated summaries. So we're still able to capture leads with that. So we want to thrive by emphasizing thought leadership, white papers, case studies, things that show that we are the source that should be gone to, and we know what we're talking about. In addition to that, we want to make sure that we also put schema markup behind that information so that AI can read it as easily as possible and put out that information on Google, and then just making sure that our content is as high value to our users as it can be. And then for the audience, since industrial buyers are kind of very much so increasing their reliance on AI-powered search to streamline their searches and make recommendations, compare products and things like that, the opportunity here is that AI search is most effective for informational queries. So it seeks out comprehensive, clear, structured site content. So that is what we want to provide to our users. So the solution here would just be to make sure that all of our products have AI readable specs, FAQs, make sure that we're answering any possible questions that our users may have, and just kind of optimize for technical buyers. And also, what's important here is making sure that we diversify our traffic channels. So not just relying solely on organic search, but also doing some social media work or some making sure that we have profiles on like manufacturing directories and putting out trade publications and things like that. In the event that we choose to ignore AI-powered search, a couple of things will happen. First thing is that we'll lose brand visibility and lead generation may decline. And then the second thing is that you risk losing trust and connection with your audience. So that is two things that we don't want to happen. We don't want to lose any credibility. We don't want to reduce any leads. We don't want any reduced ROI. That's like something that's extremely important with us. And then for losing the connection with the audience, we don't want to give our audience an opportunity to go find other sources of information. So for them to find our competitors as their number one choice, we don't want that. And there's a possibility that their information could be outdated or it could be incorrect. So we want to make sure that our content is most accurate and it is the most reputable so that we show up in AI search.
And as somebody who's had the opportunity, I've been doing this for, almost 15 years now, to work with a lot of brands, many of them represented on this call. Organic search has always been a heavy driver of digital leads. And because we're seeing that disruption and starting to see the way that people are discovering new products, new solutions, trying to solve their problems, because there is a new channel here, being this AI-powered search, we kind of stand to predict that, this will continue to become a greater and greater lead source, and we do have some data that we can look at here in a minute to kind of validate that. So when you really up level that and think about it at the highest level, if there are sales opportunities out there currently being won by search, there are going to be sales opportunities to win, via AI optimization. And the brands that, take a first mover approach, but do so in a way that, as Tori mentioned, SEO and AEO can be very complementary. You can still reinforce your traditional SEO position while gaining share, in this new AI-driven search space. So the brands that can move first and really win in this new landscape really do at the highest level stand to win those sales, gain market share, and grow their business in a way that's going to outflank the competition. So looking ahead, we'll talk about some ways to maybe accomplish that.
Sure. So there are a few limitations to AI-powered search. Of course, we have already figured out how we want to respond to those. So a few of the things are inaccuracy or misinformation, which is why it's so important for us to make sure that our information is fact-checked and expert-driven. And then we want to make sure that we're super transparent so that we can not be a part of the source transparency issue. We also want to reduce AI bias. So we want to make sure that we have diverse perspectives, make sure that we're authoritative, and just kind of represent our information as the most credible information to use. Also, naturally, we want to follow compliance standards, ensure that there's secure data handling, and then we want to make sure that our content is SEO friendly so that we don't feel such a hit from the reduced organic traffic that is possible to happen. We would do that with thought leadership and, like I said before, AI optimized FAQs, multimedia, things like that, and making sure that that information is following the EEAT guidelines of that Google has set. So that's experience, expertise, authority, and trustworthiness, just to make sure that we are favored by AI. For the next part. So this is how we're going to strategize around AI-powered search. First thing is that we want to make sure that we are putting out the proper trust signals. So because AI enhances thought leadership credibility, we want to build our backlinks, make sure that we are citing our sources, that we're being used as a proper source on other sites. And that way it will kind of boost our credibility on search engines. And that way we'll be more likely to show up in the AI overviews. That will potentially lead to smarter users. So those users will educate themselves on our brand, They'll figure out what it is that they kind of want to do in terms of a product. And with those pre-qualified users who have already educated themselves on our brand, we would, if they click into it, they'll lead into a they have higher incentive conversions. So they have a clear purpose. They see us more as a source that they would like to go with, which is why they click into our website. And that kind of leads to stronger ROI. So there's a greater potential for conversion there. So how do we get into the AEO club? There's 4 top things that we want to make sure that we push is always on content. So we want to maintain a consistent publishing cadence, make sure that content is evergreen, make sure that we have topical authority. So we are establishing ourselves as the definitive brand source, the definitive source of information, and that we are building strong backlinks and receiving citations from other sites. And then we are structuring our content with
I think we're really making sure that things are structured in, a Q&A format, and we'll get a little bit deeper into this in a second. Make sure that we're directly answering the specific questions that, we know the market is looking for. And there's different ways to do that. In fact, we'll get into that here in a second. There's a real simple framework that, as we're thinking about content strategy and content execution, and how it can feed both traditional SEO, but really position brands to win, looking ahead, as AEO and LLMs become more prevalent, it's a 2-step process. Obsessively find and explore what your users are actively looking for. And there's some very tactical things that can be done to gather data around that. We'll talk about that in a second. And step 2, when we talk about that content structure, is make sure we answer their most pressing questions as directly and simply as possible. And there's, some really good reasons for that. When we think about the way that, again, the semantic search model is changing. Before, we used to look at, as technical marketers, digital marketers, what are the keywords out there that are getting the most traffic and are most relevant to my business? Go use a tool to quantify that and say, hey, I've got this many searches for this specific keyword. If I rank number 1, I can expect this many clicks. And, if those clicks convert, here's how many leads. And it becomes more of a math equation. But as the model changes and it's more semantic and question-based, you can't necessarily control the conversations that people are going to be having with these tools or what the tools put out with that level of predictability. So, oddly enough, the best way to make sure that you're well positioned, again, is obsessively think about the questions that your customers are asking and put that content out there to give yourself the greatest probability to be what is recommended by these entrants. So a little more detail on what that looks like here. So that first step, right, in the find and answer model, is we really need to find, what users are asking for. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. And one of the things that I love most about this is, as much as we love SEO, and as great as it's been for a lot of the brands we represent and all that, many times it did feel like a math equation, right? What does SEMrush, SpyFu, Google Search Console, Google Trends, what does that tell us that people are searching? And then we would just optimize a little bit more clinically around those specific keywords. That's great, but with AEO, this gives us the opportunity to really be a lot more customer centric, but still lean into the technology that's driving these algorithms. So what we need to attack here is looking at any potential data set and collaborative, opportunity to become as dialed in with the most common questions that customers are asking as possible. So what that looks like, at the top level, and again, where SEO and AEO kind of intersect, is analyzing traditional search data to do, SEO audits, but with a little bit of a different angle where instead of just looking at what are the keywords that are driving traffic to my site or competitor sites, it's what are the keywords that are actually queries that include words like what, where, why, when, how, which gives us a way to, at scale, figure out what questions are being asked to traditional search engines, which will probably emulate the same questions that people are using in these LLMs. What are the questions that are coming into your site search? Say a little search bar in the corner of your website. And what questions are people putting in form submissions? These are all pretty structured data sets that you can grab and analyze to start to get a better understanding of what questions your customers are asking. And a lot of times there's these other signals where people will tell you, sometimes very directly, what they're looking for. So social media audits and reviews and looking at what is the conversation around social media, documenting that, doing it with regularity, because if people are on social media asking something or talking about something, you can be darn sure they're going to ChatGPT or using Gemini or, that new AI mode that's even in, your AI overviews to start asking those same questions. Reviews and forums. That can be a great way, especially if you work in an industry that, has a heavy user community around it that's pretty dedicated. I know, this is an example of some of the industries we have experience with. If you're in automotive aftermarket or, some of those where you've got a lot of potential users for your equipment, there'll be pretty big, robust forums where you can understand what conversation is happening, what questions are people asking in those places. And also like placing more emphasis around things like VOC and industry studies, whether they're ones you run or ones that, you're accessing through trade associations or, that you're finding in trade pubs. Before, again, SEO is really looking at that clinical spreadsheet data, developing, content strategies to just hit keywords in a spreadsheet. This allows you to leverage more customer intimacy, more customer data to figure out your content strategy here. Then the other big thing is really mining that cross-functional data. So, if you're not already doing this as a marketer where you're having regular collaborative discussions with, sales, customer service, maybe product development, or product management to figure out just what are the most regular questions that you're getting. And that doesn't have to be anything major. That can be quick little 15-minute sessions, could even be a water cooler conversation or just a quick informal, virtual meeting, just to start to anecdotally get that information and document that, and then start to work that into a strategy. But other things that we're starting to see is, CRM data. Sales teams regularly in the CRM, maybe they even have their email inboxes synced to it, with their permission, of course, diving into some of that data to look for common threads, common tones, service tickets. So if you've got your customer support or service team using some type of ticketing system, looking through those things to find, again, what are the most common questions. And then the real hack that we're seeing these days is when a company has the ability to get really detailed call notes, ideally through like an AI assistant that's building full transcripts, taking recordings and then transcribing them, creates this giant unstructured data set that is regularly building on itself. That you can then, not to get too meta with it, but you can use an AI tool with those transcripts to just straight up ask the transcripts, hey, what are the most common questions that we're getting from customers right now? Once you've really got a detailed, statistically significant set of what those questions are, that's when you can start moving with a lot of confidence that you can create content, and again, very deliberately structured content that's going to move the needle from an LLM perspective. What that can look like is, very straight to the point Q&A and FAQ type content on your website that really tees that question up and provides a very direct answer. The reason that's so important is, especially in, the niche markets like many of us represent, there's going to be very specific questions. And what's great about it is unless your competitors are thinking this way, there's a good chance that they might not have a very discrete, well-structured answer to that question out there. So if you can be the first mover and kind of beat everybody else to providing those direct answers to those questions, you've got a very good chance of those LLMs being able to, whether it's crawling on your website or somebody referencing it to answer a direct question, maybe out on a forum or a social media platform. There's a really good chance that when those LLMs go out and they're, feeding their data sets and training off all the data that's out there, that you're going to be what they train on. Another great way to do that and generate these libraries of content is take those questions and just turn the camera on one of your subject matter experts. Get a video interview of them answering that specific question. And what can be powerful about that is you can take that video content, with a little bit of polish and not all that much these days, becomes a great social post that you can put out there. But then you can take the transcript from that video too and turn it into that FAQ or Q&A blog post, and all those different things. So by starting with that video, you get all these different assets that, again, you're deliberately and strategically creating to answer the pressing questions that you've kind of mined through step one of this process. The other big step here, though, is we really need to make sure that we're distributing this content at scale as much as possible. You think about the marginal cost to post something on social or, to maybe get a newsletter out to your channel partners, that just make them aware of the content, maybe say, hey, if you like, maybe, spin it a little bit, put it on your own website and link back to us, and really just get this message out there in as many ways as possible. And that also includes things like directories, which Tori can attest, that's been one of the biggest SEO hacks that brands have been able to make to get backlink profiles. But anything you can do, like in those directory listings to get some of this content on there as possible, it's great too. The other one, is trade publications. Well, the other ones, when we talked about that marginal or nominal cost to getting this content out there, can be relatively low. Trade publications, especially from a sponsored content perspective, do carry a little bit of cost, but again, they've been important for SEO, but even more pressing for AEO, because a lot of times those publications are going to generate, hey, top brands to achieve, a solution to problem Y, or all these different types of content that they historically have structured really well to put a shine on a product category. It's not uncommon where you've got buyer's guide opportunities and things like that. Those articles from these publications are going to be primed to kind of feed and train these data sets. So making sure that you're present, is also going to be extremely important. If you are a pretty experienced practitioner SEO, you might be looking at some of this stuff too and saying, hey, well, this is just good best practice for SEO at the same time. You're right. And again, like Tori mentioned a couple times, these two things, like really when you do them right, they feed off of each other. But I think what's different, again, is that stepping away from the spreadsheet and mental model associated with, we need to rank number one for this keyword. And again, being more deliberate on, we need to be the definitive resource to answer this specific question. Is really the big shift here to make sure that you can win in both the SEO and AEO game. So probably more detail than you wanted for one slide, but I think there's a lot of good info here. Might be biased, but I think these are some really actionable things that you can think about as you're building that strategy. And Tori will talk a little bit more about that now.
Sure. So now we're going to go into the different AEO audits that we plan to offer. Starting off with the current state audit. So that's essentially just a foundation to determine what strengths, weaknesses, opportunities there are, and just kind of getting a lay of the land in terms of where we show up in visibility, content, authority and structure, competitive positioning, technical stance, etc. We just feel like it's a crucial first step to make sure that we improve visibility and performance moving forward. And then for this section, we want to identify, like Colton was saying, specific questions, phrases, those are extremely important, that our audience would be using so that we can create content around that. So we want to look at top performing keywords. We want to look at any missed opportunity keywords that our competitors may be answering questions around. And then we want to make sure that we create, of course, authoritative content around these queries and key phrases, so that we can more likely be featured in Google search or other search. We also look at content readiness. So this is just an idea of how the quality of the content is, if it comes across as authoritative, if it has the right tone, the right skimmable kind of format that AI likes. We want to make sure that we don't miss any topic opportunities that we need to cover, and make sure that we also cite proper sources, so that we are also giving the trustworthy aura that we would like to give with our content. And then lastly, looking at the technical structure. So it plays a crucial role in how well AI understands our content. So we want to implement schema markup. We want to make sure that the site structure is up to par, and that we're just following all the technical best practices to make sure that we're being featured. Yeah. And then key performance indicators.
Yeah, so obviously it's a big shift, right? And with any big shift, you need to think strategically about how do you change your process and what are the content needs that we're going to need to generate to support winning the AEO game. Well, and anytime that there's a shift and a change in process, that typically requires, an investment of, time and energy. And the most important thing whenever you're investing time and energy is to ask yourself, well, how do we know if we're winning? How do we know if this investment is paying off? And well, it's still somewhat early in the game, and really the impact that we're seeing from, LLMs and AI overviews. It's really been around for about 12 months now. It's still a pretty, say, change-rich and disruptive environment. Things are changing constantly. But now that we've got a little time under our belt, we've had the opportunity to watch what's going on. We do think that there are 3 ways and 3 KPIs that you can really watch and look at that are going to be consistent and also be big drivers to act as a measuring stick for your AEO performance. So the first one is really, we're calling visibility, and these are typically visibility scores that you're going to see in different tools and different platforms. Some of this will probably mean a lot to you already if you're an in-the-weeds practitioner of SEO already. But there are tools out there. SEMrush is one of our favorites. Moz is another great one. There's also some that specialize specifically in AEO. There's a tool out there called Ensun, ENSUN. And HubSpot also has an AI analysis tool that you can turn on your content that really tells you is your content structured, and also what key phrases or questions is it most visible for. Now, a lot of this is, there's still a black box around exactly how a lot of these LLMs work, and there are a lot of different LLMs. So there's a lot of puts, takes, and factors and variables that go into that equation. But we are starting to see tools out there that will give you, a percentage score, usually out of 100, on how well your content is structured and how visible it is for certain phrases and keywords. You probably are already maybe using some tools like this. For those of you who I know a lot of you are. But new ones are coming out all the time. But what we do recommend is stick to the incumbent tools, at least for a while. Just because there's so much momentum, motion, and change out there, that by sticking to the incumbent tools, you can get a good baseline and also use a familiar toolkit. Google recently has really made some big steps and strides here with a little bit of configuration. You can even start to get the number of times that you've shown up in AI overviews as a metric that you can watch and measure and monitor. And, especially with the launch of their new AI mode in search, which you're kind of seeing in that box over, to the right, they're starting to make some investments in empowering marketers to understand how they're showing up in Google's AI tools. And when you think about it, they're pretty darn incentivized to help empower marketers because, well, we're responsible for a lot of Google's revenue. So looking at what the incumbent tools are to check your visibility, start there, and then start to explore some of the other visibility tools out there. It's what we recommend. The second stool to this KPI and measurement game in the AEO space is this whole idea of branded search. So if you're not familiar with that concept, that would be any search query that includes your brand name. So in our case, that'd be anybody that's searching DeanHouston. So not too tough to figure out what a search query could look like for your brand there. Just take your brand name or some of your product brands, maybe even some of your specific product names, and look at those. The reason to really start placing an even greater emphasis on managing and monitoring your branded search volume and how that's impacting lead generation is because of the theory that the more that people are using LLMs, the more they're using AI overviews, they're falling into that zero-click education journey. So they might be out there talking to a tool all the way to the point where they've got a short list of 1, 2, maybe 3 brands that they want to consider for a new purchase. When that's the case, the way that people will get to your website, they might click over, and we are starting to see people click over from citations, in their chat with the LLM or within an AI overview. But more often than not, what's happening is they're using LLMs to educate themselves, shortlisting a set of brands, and then just going straight to a traditional search engine and using branded search or using a brand's name or a specific product name to get to their website to start the buying process. So, well, kind of sounds weird. Hey, to measure your AEO success, look at your traditional branded search. It's because of the way that these LLMs are impacting the buyer's journey. And what's great about that is branded search usually has really high intent and converts really well. So if you're starting to see this number go up or even stay static because of the, headwinds that are, kind of being given by traditional search, it's a great sign, and it's a great sign that people are finding you via AI. The other thing, and this is, semi-recent, but we are starting to see more often than not, a lot of the brands that we have the opportunity to serve and represent are starting to get a more steady and growing stream of leads. If they're using something like a HubSpot or a Marketo or, Zendesk Sell, add a marketing automation tool, or, lead capture tool that you use there. You can kind of see the source. Where are people coming from? How are they getting to our website before they fill out a form? More and more and more we are starting to see, and this can look different, depending on what tool you're using. But more often we're starting to see ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, Perplexity, all these different LLM brands kind of being listed as referring sources before somebody fills out a form. Without getting too into it and to protect the innocent, we're even starting to see, borderline double digits in leads coming through, as a percentage basis. So somewhere between 8 to 10, 12% of leads coming into a website starting to have those LLM driven sources. So, and even then, that's because they clicked a specific citation. That's how that technology works. You need to click a citation to be able to attribute things to that level. But when we're starting to see, again, 8 to 12% of leads coming in that are associated with clicks on those citations, the true number of lead generation that is coming in via these LLMs are represented by customers who are educating themselves with LLMs is probably much higher, because the typical journey is, again, that branded search journey, not necessarily clicking the citation in the LLM tool. But these are all things that you can set up, you can dashboard, you can look at to start to get a better sense at how AEO is impacting your business and providing you opportunity.
Now for our action plan that we want to present. Just a simple 3 steps. The first thing that we want to do is make sure that you all execute a current state SEO or AEO audit, execute a current state AEO audit, make sure we find and define needs from the audience, and then answer and control the narrative. So essentially, we want to audit and analyze the user behavior, make sure that we're evaluating AI visibility, how frequently we do show up, any threats or opportunities, and then just any roadblocks. And then in terms of finding and defining the audience needs, again, going through those customer support queries, things like that, search logs, and just making sure that we identify patterns and work around what our audience typically, the common issues that they run into. And then we want to answer and control that narrative. So just creating that content strategy to authoritatively answer the market's questions. We want to also make sure that we do that before competitors do and better than competitors do.
And again, search is changing. It's hard to argue with it. And as industrial marketers, technical products and service marketers, our approach needs to too. So with that, I'm glad we finished a little early with that part of the presentation, because really we want to get into the Q&A.
For sure.
I see we've got one great question here from somebody anonymous. We leave that alone, but we will answer the question. But we definitely invite everybody, any questions you have, whether it's in the chat or in that Q&A box, throw them in there, because we've got some time to answer them. So again, don't know exactly who asked this one, but do you have any recommendations or observations about proof statements in content helping to juice a company's authority level AEO impact? I love that. The way I look at a proof statement is, hey, what is a quantifiable data point that a brand can say that represents their unique differentiation? Tori, what do you think about that? I mean, when a brand can go out there and say, hey, our product is X percentage more efficient than a leading competitor, or, our products typically last X number of years from a durability perspective. How does that help from an AEO perspective?
The more specific that you are about specific aspects of your company and the higher quality, valuable things that you provide for users, you do want to make sure that you put that in your content. Don't be modest about it. Just, make sure that you present yourself as if you're the best, you're the best. Sorry, I saw another question pop up. I'll close that out. But that is very important to make sure that you speak about yourself in a high value kind of way. And of course, in the event that you do show up for an AI overview, which is what we aim for, that is what would be presented to the end user.
Yep. The other thing too that I think is a really interesting point on that, and I don't know, and I challenge everybody, start playing with ChatGPT more, asking more questions about your market. If you're not already doing that on a regular basis, it can be a lot of fun, and also pretty illuminating. But by using those proof statements, and really getting quantifiable, verifiable metrics on how great your product is out there, but doing it, as objectively as possible. So providing detail on maybe the study or the research or the test that you use to get there, or the data that you're referencing. There can be something really interesting, because when these LLMs are providing their answers, they very often want to do comparative statements where, hey, who are the best suppliers for, this specific product category that I'm looking at? They do want to try and be as objective and educational as possible. So they will look at, those verifiable points and kind of give you 3 to 5 potential suppliers, and then tell you what they're best at, what their competitive advantage is, what their differentiation is. So by putting that out clearly through something like a proof statement, you're going to have the best chance of actually making sure that your differentiation is also reflected when people are searching via an LLM. So that's it's a great question. Don't know who asked it, but thank you.
Thank you.
But yeah, that can be a really powerful thing. Jeremy, asks, what is schema and schema markup? Jeremy, I'll be honest with you, I have no idea. That's why we have Tori on the call, and the technical expert. So I'll let her field that one.
Yeah, for sure. So schema markup, which can also kind of be intersection with, you might hear structured data, or rich snippets. Essentially, they all go hand in hand. So schema markup by itself is the code that goes behind a certain patch of information that you want to make sure appears in Google search results as like a fancier kind of search result. So instead of it just being a normal blue link title description kind of thing, it kind of adds more richness to the results. So you can have it populate ratings or like specific people that you want to be identified during somebody's search. You can pull up reviews, that kind of thing. So it just kind of allows you to enhance your search results. So with using the structured data and the schema markup, you'll see those interchangeably. You want to put that behind certain pieces of content, and then that's how you get, you look out for it later, but the fancier kind of search results that appear.
I'm seeing Kevin's got a great question here. You know, should older evergreen content be updated with AIO specifically in mind? If so, how often? We're going to answer that one in a second because we've got another anonymous question here that I think really kind of go hand in hand with what Kevin asked. So my marketing team is stretched thin right now and is having a hard time incorporating the time to work on AEO. I think we can all relate. What are some of the lowest effort, highest reward AEO solutions you would recommend to get the most out of their limited time? You know, going back, and Tori, love you to jump in here in just a second, but like going back to Kevin's question, you know, the first thing I do is even if it's maybe through that approaching a crawl, walk, run strategy to step one in that find and answer approach, I would maybe just have some very quick, informal 15-minute meetings with customer service and sales and just ask, what are the most common questions that you're getting? You know, you don't have to go through all 12 points to go mine all those different data paths to figure out what are the common questions. Maybe just that quick anecdotal conversation. I'd start there, you know, get a couple questions that, you know, maybe 2 or 3 people are all in consensus. Oh, yeah, I hear that one all the time. Shortlist those, you know, just get 2 or 3 of them. And then, you know, relating back to Kevin's question, look at the content that you've got that already exists that's in the ballpark of answering those questions. Make simple edits to those, author that, get that published. Because again, the theory here, if there are questions that pop up with your sales and, you know, customer service teams that they're hearing all the time, I can almost guarantee you those questions are being asked of AI. So if you can get out there and quickly get direct answers to those questions, ideally leveraging that existing content like Kevin alluded to, that can be a great way to make the most of, you know, a limited resource pool. And that could be a good way to get jump started. And then ideally, if you can see the results, see some positive impact, that'll give you the ability to invest a little bit more and make it more of a priority, maybe even get some more resources for it. What do you think, though, Tori? What are some of the other things like you were working with a brand? It's the first thing you were doing is say, hey, I need results quick. What's the first thing that you would do?
I feel like one of the things that I commonly say is the FAQs are super important. So just making sure that those are present on the most popular pages of your website, making sure that they also have FAQ schema behind them is very helpful. And then if I could say something about like the limited time that you have or the limited bandwidth, you don't have to do it all at once. You don't have to, you know, completely revamp your content and everything. Just a couple of pages a month that could do wonders. Working with the top pages on your site, the most popular pages, that's where you would start at. And then also working on pages that you want to potentially boost up that aren't getting as much traffic. Those are kind of the 2 sweet spots that I would suggest.
Love it. So Zach, you know, is there a hierarchy of what content is most effective at being picked up by AI search tools? Is it any different than what content is best to be picked up for SEO? Well, again, if you're doing it right, you can do both. Maybe, you know, this is a 2-parter. Which of those 2 parts you want to take, Tori? And then I'll take the other one.
Well, I have a little bit of information on that, just a snitch.
Right.
So I pulled it up in my background as part of my notes. But part of the most like valuable types of content would be, again, FAQs, how-to guides, white papers, anything that's kind of updated insights on what's going on in the industry right now. That kind of content is super valuable to users. So those are what I am aware of as are the more valuable forms of AI type content. I'm sure that all of them are, they offer value in themselves, but those are the top ones that I've kept coming across while I was doing my research.
Cool. And, what are some of the subtle differences, I think, kind of the second part of that question, Zach, is, again, where a lot of times, now I guess taking the FAQ approach inherently probably is in your headers in your content or on that web page that you publish with the material on it. Because it's an FAQ, it'll probably be question based. A lot of times, when we looked at, traditional thought leadership like blog posts and things like that, it was really just get the core keywords in with a really great headline. Well, now what I would recommend is one, those FAQ, QA type things like Tori recommended, but make sure that in your headers and the way that your content is structured, that you're actually posing the questions that you're answering. And you can still get some good SEO keywords in those headers that are question based, but again, when you think about the way those LLMs work, and it's kind of funny, if you use something like Gemini's deep research, as an example, it'll actually show you what it's doing in the background to go do the research for you. A lot of times it just goes and asks those questions to search engines and then goes and looks at all the links that are out there. So by having those questions in your headers, which is a little bit different than how it's been done traditionally, that can be a good way to make sure that you're picked up by AI, but you can still get the keywords in those question headers, so it can be a good SEO benefit as well. Oh, here's a real good one. Could competitors feed false information into AI results to lessen your brand and promote their own, in the opinion, in the eyes of AI?
I will go ahead.
Salacious.
Right. I'll go ahead and say that if they could do it, it would be very, very hard, because it has to be fact-based information. So ensuring that you kind of take over your own narrative of what's going on with your brand, it would make it much more difficult for somebody to just swoop in and say, hey, I don't like that brand. This is why. And then it actually has an effect on what's going on with your search results. But in the event that you did come across something like that, that's a form of content that you could respond to with more factual information, kind of combat it that way. Yeah, it would be overall pretty difficult though, so.
Yep, absolutely. And, well, all the algorithms out there for these LLMs are different. They do follow, a pretty good sense of logic with a lot of things where it's trust but verify. So what that means is, if they see something out there, in order to, again, because AI at the end of the day is data, statistics, and software, the software being the LLM, the data being all the material it eats, and then statistics, that's the algorithm that it runs. In order to, statistically say this is the right answer to the question that's being asked to me, it's going to go out there, and if it's going to give you an answer, it's going to check multiple sources against each other. So it would need to be a really big smear campaign, highly orchestrated, to kind of, in this context, get AI to lie on their behalf. And if that's the case, they're probably going to be publishing a lot of content around there that is incorrect, that would give you an opportunity to address it. So it'd be really tough in the way that these tools work. I mean, they don't want to mislead people either, because if people lose trust in LLMs, they're going to use them less. And the companies that are investing a lot of money to build these tools, they don't like that. So, all right. Got two more questions. I know we're set to go for about another 15 minutes, so we'll keep answering in a way. But I know asking for a full hour is a lot of people these days. So glad everybody's here. So we'll keep going, keep asking questions. But next one here is, how can brands balance the need for speed and content production with the depth of expertise that AEO demands for long-term authority and visibility? Ooh.
I almost kind of want to suggest it. It's okay to start off your content by using AI to kind of assist with it. As I said earlier in the slides, it's kind of important that you still have that like human intervention when you're producing content for your website. So even if you do have some AI generated or AI assisted content, because we don't want to necessarily just have fully AI generated content, making sure that we use that as a tool to kind of speed up the process, but also using the human touch that we have to make sure that it's, you know, factual information, that it's quality information. I feel like that's a core piece to kind of working against that. And then also, as we were kind of saying earlier, it doesn't always have to start with just pushing out brand new information. Part of that could just be updating any previous information that kind of exists on your site and just updating it to facilitate with AI overviews or just overall answer engine optimization.
Yeah. And I think, you know, another big thing is more on the content production side, you know, again, because content volume is going to be a huge benefit for you, especially when it's dialed into, you know, again, those most pressing questions that we can, you know, kind of curate from the marketplace is, if you can, prioritize as many of those video interviews as you can as part of your content creation workflow. The reason being, you know, and I know a lot of times people hear video and think, oh, big production value, you know, we got to call in the camera crew and all that. I mean, these days we've all got, you know, insanely high powered cameras in our pockets. You know, and you can get things like lapel mics for under $50, you know, on Amazon, especially in Prime Week. And you can use those tools and create things that are absolutely appropriate for, you know, social media, maybe quick hit advertising, things like that. So you can kind of get those talking head videos, but when you get those videos put together, especially again, just interviewing based on the top questions that you're seeing, those recordings can be so rich to create a lot of content quickly. You know, especially in the niche markets we work in, we definitely don't recommend that you just take video, get the transcript, throw the transcript into AI and say, turn this into a 250 word Q&A post. The tools still aren't good enough to understand all the you know, technical vocabulary and, you know, these in-depth, you know, kind of concepts, but they can get you moving pretty quickly to generate a lot of material really quickly. So start with video, transcribe it, use AI to generate some additional material, but keep a human in the loop, keep a human editor that understands your products in that process. That'll probably give you the ability to scale content pretty quickly. All right. Ooh, another good one, Tori.
Right.
What are the most common technical or content mistakes that hurt a brand's AEO?
I'll say for technical, it's it's easy to miss, but also like super important to use schema markup in the content. I feel like that's kind of one of the things that is put lower on the rankings in terms of importance here, but that's something that's I'm not a dev person, so I don't want to say easy implementation, but I would say low hanging, easy opportunity to do, and just also making sure that the schema is correct. And then things like slow or unoptimized pages, we want to just kind of follow the normal SEO rules, just with AEO in mind. So just improving the page load speed of your site, making sure that it's UX friendly. Of course, any site that has higher UX kind of scores, it does get recognized by Google as a more reputable site, a more higher quality site. So those are some technical things. And then for content, common mistakes, I'll say writing extremely long, kind of monotonous paragraphs, long blog posts, and there's no kind of break to them. So what AEO likes is anything that uses lists, any bullet points, shorter, structured paragraphs, making sure that we mention like the proper keywords and things. Just those are the simpler things that we can kind of make sure that we use to not hurt the AEO.
Well, that's a really good one too, because when you think about it, I mean, this hasn't been in trend for maybe the past 3 or 4 years, but there was a time where it was like, hey, you need blog posts of 750 words or 750 to 1200 words to really rank well for a keyword. Those things, they've been loosening up on the SEO side, but still a lot of people build that into their process where they're trying to hit word counts and things like that because that's what they think the robots want. Well, we've got new robots and they act a little bit more human. So that's where they like those, bullets and, harder hitting, more direct pieces of content. So that is a big mistake. It was a good one. This last question, I can absolutely understand why somebody asked this one anonymously. One lesson you've learned the hard way about AEO that you think people on this call could benefit from?
I can take that.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Of course. So, one of the things that I've kind of learned over personal experience, over work experience, is that there will be times where a company might want to push out information that's not, I don't want to say it's not valuable, but it's information that they want to push out, but it has nothing really to do with what users are trying to learn about the company or what they're trying to research. So it is, of course, essential to make sure that you push out the information that you feel is important for a user to see. But if it's not around something that's searchable or something that's being searched, it's almost kind of like you're just kind of talking into thin air. So making sure that if you do have content that you want to be pushed out and it's not necessarily a more popular or prominent topic, making sure that you pair that up with information that people are searching for, it kind of helps you to just kind of tie those two in together so you kind of get the best of both worlds.
This is a good way to say that, like thinking a little too much about your own agenda, your own priorities,
And
as
not the
opposed to
user, the value.
what the end user and the customer is looking at. It's a good one, because if I would have had to answer this one, I would have been like failing to realize sooner and quicker, because it's like such an obvious first principle of marketing. Like, the way to win here is by giving customers what they are truly asking for and what they truly need. And again, it's a classic first principle of good marketing and really just being a great customer centric company, which I think probably everybody on this call is. But it's really, stepping outside yourself, and instead of looking at spreadsheets on what search volumes are and making it more of a technical experience, understanding that the way that this technology works is to try and emulate how a human behaves and what a human is asking. And because of that, like, it sounds weird, we're talking about AI and, all the disruptive qualities that represents, but in many ways, I think it's making search and brand discovery more human. And I don't know why, for me personally, like, SEO has always been such a technical thing. It's almost refreshing now that we've realized that it's what humans are looking for that matters the most, and what is the market asking that matters the most. So that's the biggest lesson I've learned, that I feel like I was way behind on, and it was so obvious and right in front of us. It's just that element of it. That good AEO is truly customer centric content. Of course, there's some technical pieces as Tori walked through in the presentation, but that's my biggest takeaway is, like, the way to win AEO, it has to be well structured. There's a technical element, but at the end of the day, it's customer centric, constant content production is where the win is. So I think that was the last question. I know we got a couple minutes left. We're happy to stick on. I think we'll be in touch. Everybody that was able to be here today, we will send you an email with the recording that'll have all of our contact information, the slides here, so some of those checklists you'll have. We did get another one in from Jeremy. Love this. But how important is frequency in creating content? That is a really good question.
I would probably say and I don't want to overwhelm, but the more the better. So however much you can keep up with sustainably would help out. Anything over 0, honestly. But frequency, you want to make sure that it's evergreen content. So if you're continuously posting about like one certain topic over the month, but then, switch up the different subtopics that could help out. But just making sure that you're kind of staying on top of it. As I said earlier, 1 or 2 posts a month could, do wonders, but then the more the better.
Yeah. No, I think it's a great way to look at it too, Tori, is, ideally, like one of the social media benchmarks, say post 3 to 5 times a week. That's a lot until you're posting once a week and then realize you got more ideas and you can do it twice a week. So in this case, like Tori said, more when it comes to frequency, the more the better. But a great way to look at that is just, hey, let's do a little bit more than we're doing today.
Exactly.
And doing that in a way, like, especially when you think about, hey, if I've got a list of 15 questions I want to make sure that I'm the authority on, you'll start to find like, hey, those are big topics. I can get in and kind of batch produce content around that topic. So maybe there's a Q&A that directly addresses the specifics around that. And then maybe there's an FAQ that has a bunch of sub questions that roll up to that topic. And maybe, you are doing that video interview with somebody. If you approach it and you look at it in those chunks, you can create 3 to 5 pieces of content. If you're doing it very systematically and in a strategic way around a specific question, pretty quickly and pretty efficiently. Again, it can sound crazy if you're maybe doing 1 post a month, 2 posts a month on your website to go from 6 to 8. But if you look at it in those bigger batches, I think it can be really powerful. And again, why frequency is so important, right now, and looking for ways to be hyper efficient and hyper relevant is so critical. Is, you look at it, like, I'm very glad that Tori's been working on this for, 6 months formally, and we've been looking at it for 12 to 18 months as an organization. This is a hot topic now. The race is on. The companies that are really thinking about this and crack the code and can become first movers and win first, they're going to probably develop a little bit of a moat, and it's going to be hard for organizations that they're competing with to catch up. But again, there's no rule of thumb yet. It's all still a little bit of a black box on the AI side. We think we understand how these things work, but it's shifting and it's pretty dynamic. So to directly answer the question, there's probably no rule of thumb for frequency of content creation, but from a directional perspective, I think we can be very confident to say the people that are generating the most content around the most pressing questions are going to be the ones that win long term. The faster you can get down that path, the better. But also, on the other side, it can be very encouraging is if everybody's going slow, you've just got to be the fastest one. So looking at it, how often your competitors are creating content, benchmarking that, and just making sure you're outrunning them. And that's also really the best way to look at it.
Yeah, and also making sure that your the quality of your content is still there. So don't let the frequency of the content diminish the amount of value that you're able to provide the user.
Yeah, it's another great point. So, all right. Well, thank you, Jeremy. That was a great way to finish it.
Thank you.
Like I said, we'll get this recording out to everybody. It'll have contact information for Tori and I, if you don't already have it. And if you're already working with us, I know your client success team manager will happily pop in. Autumn, thank you for the thank you. Glad you got something out of it. But we're looking forward to talking to whoever wants to talk about this. As you can tell, we're super passionate and excited about it. So don't be shy, and see y'all soon.
Thank you.